It was nearly midnight in the quiet suburbs of Stonebrick. The air was thick with a summer heatwave that refused to let go. In a modest two-story home on Elm Street, a woman named Amelia Brooks stood barefoot in her darkened kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she held her cell phone. The power had gone out, again. It wasn't the first time, but this time it felt different. The lights had flickered violently before the entire house plunged into darkness. Her dog, Moose, whimpered in the background, unsettled by the sudden silence and heat. Amelia's heart raced. Not from fear of the dark, but from the echo of loneliness that always seemed to grow louder when the world went quiet. Widowed 2 years ago, Amelia had built walls around her heart, but tonight felt strange. As she scrolled through local services online, she noticed a listing, Midnight Fixers, 24/7 electrical services, ask for Daniel. Without thinking too much, she dialed. Hello? A warm, slightly groggy male voice answered. Hi, I'm sorry to call so late. I've got a blackout and... No need to apologize, the voice reassured. This is what I do. What's the address? An hour later, headlights crept up her driveway. Amelia stood at the door, her robe tied tightly around her waist. When she opened it, she was met with a tall man in his mid-30s, his jumpsuit half-zipped, his hair messy, and eyes tired yet kind. Daniel Carter, he said with a smile that carried stories. Let's get your lights back on. As Daniel moved around the house with practiced ease, checking fuses, wires, and panels, Amelia found herself watching him, not with suspicion, but curiosity. There was something grounded about him. He whistled softly as he worked, made little jokes about haunted wiring, and never once looked annoyed at being called so late. As the hours ticked by, the conversation shifted. He asked about the family photos on the wall. She told him about her late husband, how he had once installed the very wiring Daniel was now fixing. There was a pause, and then Daniel softly shared that he had served in the army, worked as a technician during deployments, and found comfort in fixing broken things. Something about that struck Amelia deep. I used to feel like I was broken, she confessed quietly. Daniel looked up from the breaker box. You don't seem broken to me, he said gently. Just, rewiring. That night, he stayed longer than necessary. When the lights flicked back on, neither of them hurried. They sat in the kitchen, lit now in a soft glow, talking about the strange turns life took. Moose finally approached Daniel and rested his head on his knee, a silent approval. As dawn approached, Daniel stood to leave. Amelia walked him to the door. How much do I owe you? She asked, reaching for her wallet. Daniel hesitated, then smiled. Just a coffee. Next time. Then he was gone. But the moment lingered. Amelia stood by the door, hand resting on the frame, a strange warmth in her chest. And that was just the beginning. The following week was filled with storms. Rain hammered down on the windows like fate itself was trying to wash something away, or perhaps make something new grow. Amelia found herself thinking about Daniel more than she wanted to admit. It wasn't just the way he had fixed the lights, it was the way he had listened, really listened. Her house felt warmer after that night, and not just because the power had returned. Then came the second blackout. But this time, she didn't panic. She smiled, picked up her phone, and sent a simple message, got another blackout. You still fixing broken things? He replied within minutes, always. When Daniel arrived, it wasn't just for repairs. He brought pastries. Amelia had coffee ready. They sat, again, in her kitchen, two strangers becoming something else. The work took minutes. The conversation lasted hours. He told her about his time overseas. About the fiancée he'd lost to cancer 3 years ago. About how he'd come back to a quiet life because the chaos had finally caught up with him. And Amelia listened this time, really listened. She showed him the garden her husband had once tended. It had become overgrown, but Daniel knelt down beside her, pulling weeds, making jokes, and smiling like a man who hadn't smiled in a long time. What started as repairs became routine. Every few nights, Daniel stopped by, even when there was nothing to fix. They cooked together, laughed, and Moose had adopted him fully by now. One evening, during a heavy thunderstorm, the power flickered again, but neither of them moved. Instead, Daniel reached across the table and gently held Amelia's hand. "You know," he said softly, "not every storm is meant to break us. Some just bring us where we need to be." Amelia blinked back tears. "I don't think I called you that night because of the power." He smiled. "I know." There was no dramatic kiss. No over-the-top confession. Just two people, scarred and healing, finding warmth in the quiet. Over time, Daniel became more than an electrician. He was the man who helped Amelia rediscover laughter. The man who brought her back to life. And one morning, months later, she left an envelope on his dashboard after he'd helped repaint the garden shed. Inside was a card, "For all the things you've fixed, starting with my heart." Inside was also a small, silver key. He looked back at the house where Amelia stood in the window, holding Moose, smiling nervously. He didn't need a tip. What he had now was a place to belong. And that, more than any midnight call, was the truest power of all.